Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahawashi, Bahashum, Barakahak Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahashum, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who ruled and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure unto the end. This is the Brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson, and I'll be reading from an article on RT.com titled, "Don't Worry About World War III," says Trump. The U.S. president has claimed he prevented the Ukraine conflict from escalating into a global confrontation. And hey, to you brothers in the know, you know how humorous this title is, because there's not a goddamn thing Donald Trump can do to prevent World War III. And with the way things are looking, he's going to be the president that's going to lead the United States of America into World War III. And it's all a part of biblical prophecy. This is Revelation chapter 9, verse 12. One woe or destruction is past, referring to World War I. And behold, there come two woes more hereafter. World War II, which is past, and World War III, which for all intents and purposes you can say we're in the beginning stages of, but is quickly coming to full-blown confrontation, which the U.S., Russia, NATO, China, and all these other major nations and smaller nations are going to be involved in. And you know, when you say something twice, you mean it. This is Revelation 11, verse 14. The second woe is past, World War II, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly, again, World War III, and we are all just puppets of Yahweh Bahashem Yahawashi, actors playing our parts in his movie, and there's nothing anyone can do to break script. This is Proverbs 21, verse 1. The king's heart or mind, La'ab, is in the hand of Yahweh. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will, to fulfill his will, which calls for what? That third woe, World War III. Again, don't worry about World War III, says Trump. U.S. President Donald Trump has declared that the world is no longer facing the prospect of the Ukraine conflict escalating into World War III. You know, I'll say this. We'll have to, wait and see how much further involved, the U.S. will get in Ukraine. And then, you've got the China-Taiwan situation. But the main, climactic confrontation of World War III is going to take place in the so-called Middle East, really Western Asia, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, which that's another hot point that's been a bit, a little quiet lately. The Iran-Israel situation. And lest we forget, a couple of months ago, the U.S. did its first ever direct strike on Iranian soil. And it's just going to continue to escalate until the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat kicks off. Trump has repeatedly said that global tensions peaked when relations between Moscow and Washington hit their lowest point during President Joe Biden's tenure. He has also accused his predecessor of provoking the Ukraine conflict by backing Kiev's NATO ambitions, despite Moscow's legitimate concerns. And Trump's flip-flopping all over the place. Before he became president, he said he was going to end the war in 24 hours. And here we are several months later. And then you have some reports saying that the U.S. will send, U.S. military personnel there. And now they won't. With Donald Trump, it's just a whole back and forth to him. Which, if you MAGA heads can't see that this guy is nothing more than just another face of the same corporation, then I don't know what to tell you. In a podcast with radio host Mark Levin, published on Wednesday, Trump said that when he came into office earlier this year, the Ukraine conflict was raging and heading to World War III. However, he argued that now You're not going to have that anymore. That's the nice part. You're not going to have to worry about that, Trump said, admitting that it remains to be seen how exactly the conflict will be resolved. And, I believe that Trump doesn't even believe this, bullshit he's spewing. Because, again, he's flip-flopping every which way but loose. But, as it says in Jeremiah 50, verse 43, the king of Babylon hath heard the report of them, and his hands waxed feeble. Anguish took hold of him, and pangs as of a woman in travail. And the king of Babylon, or Babylon the Great, which is one of the biblical names for the United States of America, is ultimately these elites, such as the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers that pulled the string. But the face of the corporation, that king of Babylon is, of course, Donald Trump. But as it says, the king of Babylon hath heard the report of them. Heard the report of who? The prophets, which best believe Donald Trump is intimately aware of the Hebrew Israelites. I'll never forget, a couple of years ago during his first presidency, I believe it was during those George Floyd protests, he put up a tweet on Twitter that was taken down like maybe 20 seconds later, where he said, I guess the black, because they like to call us, the black Hebrew Israelites. The black Hebrew Israelites are happy to see us tear ourselves apart. So for you to name drop like that, and you're listening in, which him and his cabinet are listening in, these government officials, these alphabet agencies, and best believe the true kings of Babylon. But as it says, and his hands waxed feeble, anguish took hold of him, and pangs as of a woman in travail. Because when they listen to us, what do we say? There will be World War III, and it will go nuclear. And the United States of America will be wiped off the face of the earth by nuclear missiles. And the main nation that's going to lead those strikes is Russia, which when you read, a couple of verses up, and, damn near at the beginning of the chapter, that's all it's talking about, is that North country, Russia, coming against Babylon to take her with those nuclear missiles. Since returning to office, Trump has taken a markedly different approach toward Russia compared to Biden. He has reopened high-level diplomatic channels with Moscow and communicated directly with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Last week, Trump hosted Putin in Alaska for the first face-to-face talks between the American and Russian leaders since the escalation of the Ukraine conflict in February 2022. On Monday, Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky and several European leaders arrived in Washington to talk with Trump. Trump described his talks with Putin as very productive and said the meetings have made a settlement more realistic. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt told reporters that there is now light at the end of the tunnel and an opportunity for lasting peace. U.S. officials have emphasized that the process will take time, but have insisted that progress has been made. But biblical prophecy says otherwise. That's it with this article. Let's see. Hey, Macron, the president of France, wants boots on the ground in Ukraine. All you're hearing of is wars and rumors of wars. And the only light at the end of the tunnel is going to be that nuclear light, lighting the world up. But let's get back to these precepts. Because like I said, the main thing is talking about peace with Russia. But it's going to be Russia that's going to lead these nuclear strikes against the United States of America. This is Revelation chapter 13. I'm going to start at verse 1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And this is speaking of the ancient pagan Edomite, or so-called white person, Roman Empire, which right now we are living in the revived Roman Empire. those iron toes mixed with miry clay, this NATO EU system that the US is a part of and at the head of. Verse 2, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And what this is going into is Esau's, rulerships throughout the ages, beginning with Alexander the Great, the belly and the thighs of brass, the different Grecian, kingdoms, which is that leopard. And, when you look at an image of Alexander the Great, he had a leopard's pelt on his horse. And, his helmet, I believe, was in the shape of a leopard. And his mouth is the mouth of a lion. And that's going into the British, which America came out of. And when you look at images, older images of the British Empire, they used a lion, the lion of Britain or the lion of London. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. That Roman way, which Esau's, system is built upon. Just look at America and Europe all around you, with Senate houses and political parties, Latin being used in the medical field, the architecture, et cetera, et cetera. But the point I want to harken in on is where it says, and his feet were as the feet of a bear. And your feet is what? At the end of you, at the bottom of you. And this is speaking of the Russians, which they're not a part of those iron toes mixed with miry clay, but they're going to be leading to its downfall, taking away its stability. The end of Esau, with these Russians going to war against the West, ultimately the US, and shooting those nuclear missiles onto them. Which brings us to Isaiah chapter 13. I'm going to start at verse 17. And the header reads, Babylon will fall to the Medes. And while you had the ancient Neo-Babylonians taken down by the Medo-Persian Empire, this is talking about modern spiritual Babylon as well as the spiritual Medes, the United States of America and Russia. Behold, I will stir up the Medes, the Russians, against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. And, just recently there were talks in Alaska to de-escalate the war in Ukraine. But ultimately that, the US dollar, peace treaties, nuclear weapons ban talks are all going to be futile, because when it comes time for Russia to turn those keys and shoot those nukes, nothing will stop them from doing so. Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eye shall not spare children. And those bows are symbolic for the silos and other launch platforms that those nuclear missiles are going to be fired from. Because when the prophets saw these visions, thousands of years ago, they weren't going to say a Satan II or a Zircon or a Reznik hypersonic missile. They had to describe it with the weapons that existed during their times, bows and arrows and spears and things like that. But as I said, it shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall not they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eye shall not spare children. These nuclear missiles are going to take out everybody in the United States of America outside of the 1/3 of the elect of the nation of Israel. Men, women, children, young, old, even the wicked of our people, the 2/3 of your so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Verse 19, and Babylon the Great, that virgin daughter of Babylon, the United States of America, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. And America is also known as spiritual Sodom, as pursuant to Revelation 11, verse 8, which is very easy to see why. The whole month of June is dedicated to that sodomitish behavior. And ancient Sodom and Gomorrah was wiped off the face of the earth with fire and brimstone from the sky. So this modern day Sodom and Gomorrah is going to get hit with that modern fire and brimstone, those nuclear missiles. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. And this is how we know it's not talking about the ancient Neo-Babylonians, which is in modern day Iraq. You still have people dwelling there to this day. When this Babylon gets hit, it's going to get turned into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards, where neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their folds there. Man, woman, or child will never set foot on this place ever again, and only harsh desert creatures are going to be able to dwell here after a time. But the wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures. And owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And the wild beasts of the islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and the dragons in their pleasant palaces. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. And we can clearly see that these days and the destruction of Babylon, America, are no longer being prolonged and are very near to come. But I'll just go through Joel chapter 3 real quick, because that article was talking about de-escalating Ukraine to avoid World War III. The World War III will not be de-escalated and will ultimately be in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, Western Asia. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the heathen nations. Prepare war. World War III, war with Iran, nuclear war, the war of Armageddon. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen. The U.S., Russia, China, NATO, Iran, the state of Israel, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, which are the death angels of the Lord, holding back the four winds, or this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it, which is mainly going to happen after the mark of the BEAST, which is the micro C-hip implant, which the Neuralink has a part to play in it, is mandatorily implemented, which we can see that's right around the corner with all this talk of cryptocurrencies and a digital cashless society. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh Shaphat, or Yahweh's judgment. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about, for afflicting the true children of Israel. Again, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, which you can read about in the first couple of verses of this chapter. And at the head of that list of the heathens that came against Israel, as pursuant to Psalms chapter 83, are you Edomites. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And again for America, her days are near to come and are no longer being prolonged. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere, Akim and Akwath, were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.